Okay, Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, a quick heads up that this show and tell is being recorded and will be available on this YouTube channel in due course. So welcome to the fourth show and tell of this phase of product development for BoPS, a back office planning system. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those who have joined before, it's good to see you again. So thank you for coming. My name is Tom Buttrick and I'm the product owner for BoPS here at Southwark Council, where we are working on a number of digital planning and plan tech projects that seek to improve local planning authority service design and performance. This morning, colleagues from the BoPS team will be presenting our latest work on the MVP that will be processing lawful development certificate applications and our wider programme of work. Next slide, please. So BoPS, for those who don't know, is a new software application that's designed by and for local planning authorities, and it will process planning applications in a more efficient and intuitive way, saving time and resources. Next slide, please. We're now at the end of Sprint 4, which marks the halfway point of this phase of development as we move forward to our objective of taking the MVP of BoPS to public beta testing, where we'll be testing live lawful development certificates, which should be quite exciting. Next slide, please. So for those of you who haven't been to a show and tell before, a show and tell enables us to show you the work that we've been up to, and this takes place every 2 weeks. It's also an opportunity for you to ask questions about the development of the product and where we're going. And you can do that. Next slide, please. By posting your questions on this link here. The link is also in the description of the video down below, and we'll read the questions out at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So without further ado, here's what we've been up to. I'll hand over to Ali. Oh, sorry, to Rianne, sorry, thank you.
Actually, Martin.
Martin, apologies.
No problem, thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, so the theme for this sprint, the key thing we've been working on is a bit of data privacy around protection of people's information that's being submitted, what can and can't be made public, a bit more information about how the system works, some instructional stuff, and of course testing. So Ali is going to run through what she's been doing in the testing with planning officers. And she'll show you a bit of work, including we've been looking at a kind of activity logs or an audit trail for the system as well. But first of all, I'm going to hand over to Rianne, who's going to demo the work we've been doing in general, but it will include some of the stuff on, as I just mentioned, on how to make sure we're not publishing confidential information in documents or elsewhere. So the next slide, I'll hand over to Rianne, please.
So during this sprint, we've been looking at some things like Martin mentioned, specifically making documents unavailable, because we recognise that there might be documents attached to an application that are relevant but which may contain confidential information. So we don't want to make that available via public-facing dashboards and so on. Around that, which relates to the document numbers, we've added some helpful messaging and warnings to show planning officers that in which circumstances documents will be made public. And in the spirit of adding clarity to the applications, we've introduced some much clearer signposting so that anyone visiting an application can see immediately what stage of the process it's at and what the key dates are without kind of hunting around in the document. And when I demo this in a minute, I'll show you how this differs for withdrawn and returned applications so that people don't find themselves looking at an application which has been cancelled without immediately seeing this and seeing the reason why. Alongside that, we've also been doing some work that we can't actually demo, but which has been taking place in the background, and we will hopefully be able to demo the fruits of this in coming show and tells. We're looking at moving towards supporting full householder applications, and also the changing the way we display the task list, and that means that we have to make some significant changes to the back end of the application, so we've been starting work on that. We've also been looking at the reporting data, which we can currently make available, and started mapping what we need to do, what might be missing, and looking at supporting that in future. So I'll just give you a quick run through, because it's always better to show these things and talk about them. So here we have an application which is in assessment, and we can see here that we've introduced this panel at the top of the page to show what the key dates are. And if we go to check the documents, we see now that we have this, we already had this helper text at the top saying only documents with document numbers will be listed on the decision notice and made publicly available. We can see from this list that we have documents with 2 documents with numbers, the rest don't have numbers. So this will mean that these 2 appear on the decision notice and the rest don't. If I go to edit this, we see that we have this extra text here explaining to planning officers that they need to enter numbers to have the documents taken into account on the decision notice, and also for being made available publicly. So what this means when it comes to the API, and I'm sorry this is a bit kind of techie, but there's no way around showing it in a non-techie way. In real life, the public would have access to a register or a dashboard to see these things. So I'm looking at planning application 191, the one that we've been looking at, and we can see that we have these 2 documents here with numbers. So that means that they each have a URL that the documents are publicly available on, so somebody could go and look at the plans. If I go back to my document, and here I've got this document number on this drawing, and I've decided that for some reason it contains some confidential information. It's still relevant to the application, but we don't want to make it available to the general public. I can remove the number, and then that means if I go back and re-request this application, and I go to the document, you will see that now we only have the 1 document available, and the original, the one that we've just removed, can't be seen anymore. So returning to the same document, we've removed the document from the application. The person who has applied for planning permission has maybe decided to withdraw their application. So I'm going to leave a comment here. Save that as withdrawn, and we can see here, if we visit the application, we can just see immediately that it's been withdrawn, and that the planning officer cannot see a task list. So before, it wasn't immediately clear if the planning officer visited a cancelled application, if it was cancelled. Now it's immediately obvious. And continuing with that clarity, we can see we have throughout the entire index page the differentiation, so that you can see immediately if an application is being assessed, awaiting correction, awaiting determination, or the different reasons why it might be closed. So I'm now going to go back to the slides and hand over to Ali, because she's going to talk about some of the other work that we've been doing.
Great, thank you, Rhian. So as well as the development work, we've also been testing the live site with planning officers. So so far we've been testing with 2 local councils, and we spoke with 3 planning officers, 1 planning manager and 1 technical support officer. We are aware that we want to do more testing throughout the coming sprints. We're going to be testing with more planning officers. Next slide, please. Just to give you a bit of an overview of how we've been running these sessions, we've been loading the site up with historic planning applications, and we've been asking planning officers to assess these applications, and not really giving them any guidance or hints about how to do this, because we really wanted to see how intuitive the site was to use and if they could navigate through it themselves. Next slide, please. So just some of the key takeaways. So each participant successfully assessed and determined a historic planning application. It was really interesting to see how they moved in and out of the site. to complete all of those different steps. Some of the kind of like improvements, or no, sorry, some of the challenges was that participants often assumed that an application had already been validated. So we know currently that validation often happens within a separate team, but for MVP, we're really asking planning officers to validate and then assess an application as well. But going forwards, we have now developed the ability to reassign applications. We know that if a validation team will do that step, we can then reassign an application over to a planning officer. Testing also highlighted some areas that we can make improvements in. So the document set, there was definitely a little bit of challenges or maybe some more clarity that we could bring. So planning officers often like assumed that the document tags would form the description on the decision notice. And also some often like missed adding the numbers itself so it would appear on the decision notice. So we're just thinking, how can we improve that step to increase the clarity? So if you move to the next slide. So these are some improvements that we've made since testing. So two documents were like, oh, how can we easily identify which documents are invalid or valid? So once a planning officer has come back to an application, maybe a few weeks later, and they've forgotten which document was invalid, you can clearly now see on the overview screen the which documents have been submitted, invalid and validated. Next slide, please. We've also, to increase this kind of like clarity, we've thought about how once you're invalidating an application, a planning officer can leave a note on the application. So this is just for them, this won't appear anywhere else, but that information will appear then on the top of the application in that blue box. So they can post a note, you know, this document was invalid, it was missing a scale bar, we've requested a new document from the applicant on this date. Next slide, please. As well as that, we were wanting to improve the clarity around how documents are appearing on the decision notice, and also how tags will now form the document description. So at the top, you can indicate if a document is valid or invalid, again, adding that document number, and then what the document contains, as well as if it will appear on the decision notice or not. So then if you go on to the next screen, this is then how it will appear on the overview. So you'll get, if a document is valid, then the tags is forming the floor plan proposed. And then here you can clearly see the last two, included in the decision notice, yes. Is it made public? No. So we really want to state clearly what actions have been taken. Next slide, please. As well as this, we've also been developing an audit log for each application, so you can clearly see the date, what action has been taken by which user, and the activity. So stating maybe when something has been, a document's been uploaded or archived, and then also being able to add any other notes. So if a recommendation has been made, what was the recommendation notes on that? So that's all been logged in our activity log. Next slide, please. As well as this, we've also been doing some work to the decision notice. We've been made aware that we need to include the specific regulations on the decision notice, so which class permitted development it falls into. So we're trying to figure out, well, we have developed how to make that consistent, but we'll be showing you that next sprint. And then we'll also be making some improvements to the task list as well. Next slide, please. I'm now going to pass over to Tom.
Thank you very much, Ali. And thank you for the update there of the last couple of weeks of product development. Also in the last 2 weeks, we've been doing a number of other things around the actual project. We've been doing some recruitment for the at Southwark here for the next phase of development, which will follow this phase. And we've hopefully recruited a new digital transformation officer for the planning division who will be working on the BoPS product. And we've also conducted some interviews as well for some graduate planners who will also be working on the product. You see, the interviews are ongoing, so we'll see how they turn up. We've also been working with partners at sprint planning and ongoing project alignment work with our partners in the Ripper project. We've been discussing how we're going to be doing future demos as well for our partners, keeping our partners fully up to date in terms of all the processes that BoPS can do, because we recognise the show and tell only focuses on the new sort of features, and also we're planning how we're going to present and do user testing with planning division management teams and also IT teams. We've started working on our data protection and technical design authority work, which is required for onboarding the product as we move to public beta testing, and we're going to be continuing with that with partners at this next sprint. Next slide, please. What are we doing next? I'll pass over to Martin. Martin.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, if you can move on to the next slide, please, Rhian. Yeah, so I think that was a really good overview of what we've actually built in the last sprint and what we've been working on from a design perspective, I guess, in preparation. We're quite excited that in our alpha phase, we did quite a lot of work on prototyping the householder applications, but we've really focused on permitted development up to this point. And we're going to start looking at, in a bit more detail, the full householder applications. As I say, we've got lots of stuff to test. We're going to be engaging with planning officers, but we have also realized that there's, well, we knew all along that there's more complexity around householders and processing householder applications. So we've identified a bit of what we call refactoring, which is where it's the next show and tell might be a bit light on new features. We'll certainly be able to talk about the design and research, but we're going to have to spend some time kind of restructuring the database in order to support the more complex task management of householder applications. We will still be able to do some, make some simple improvements. We have another developer joining the team who will be working with Ali specifically on facilitating testing and making tweaks to content and stuff like that. And we'll also continue to work on the data protection aspects, both from a functional point of view and from a kind of a regulatory point of view, and of course onboarding the partners. Next slide, please. As Tom mentioned, we'd really like to, we'd welcome the opportunity to demo the full system to anybody that's interested, any other local authorities. We've been doing a bit of that recently. And if you're interested in participating in the user testing, that'd be a really great way to familiarize your team with the product, with BT get involved in the user testing. So please get in touch with Tom at that email, or you can ping us on Twitter. Next slide, please. I think that's about it. We have a link here, which was shared with you at the beginning, for any questions. Next show and tell, 18th of February, but I'm going to hand over to Lauren. I don't know if there's any questions coming in, Lauren. We can field some of those.
I haven't got any questions so far. I will just give a quick refresh and see if there are any coming in.
Just give it a minute. Nothing coming through?
Not yet.
Okay, in that case, I think we're done. What we will certainly do is, if anybody wants to send in any questions, get in touch with us. There's various ways you can get in touch. And what we've done in the past is, when people have asked us questions within the sprint, we'll add them to the kind of question list for the next show and tell, and deal with them then. But we'd welcome your feedback and questions. I guess that's it. Thank you everyone for attending, and hopefully we'll see you again in